Hi, my name is Matthew Evenden. I'm a professor in the Department of Geography, and I also serve in an administrative role as the Associate Vice President of Research and Innovation at UBC. As an undergrad, I was really drawn to what I would think of as the intersection between history and geography. The deeper backstory is that I also grew up in a household where both my parents had studied geography. My father was a geography professor. We would go on family holidays, which ended up in small towns and camping on riverbanks and so on. What in retrospect seemed like kind of deeply geographical, kind of field trip-ish things rather than a Hawaiian vacation. So I think that probably positioned me in some ways to be particularly interested in geographical themes and questions.
And I just read the course titles under geography, and there were so many interesting titles, especially on the lines of sort of environment and development, and also but then there was also courses on feminist geographies. And so I decided to go to UVic and take a degree in geography, where I ended up taking a BSc, actually, not a BA. Once I did my undergrad and experienced those classes and got to read a lot of geographical literature, I just kind of figured that it was really for me.
So I guess in high school, I always thought that geography was studying maps, learning where countries were, learning where all the capitals were, which, although it was interesting, wasn't really what I wanted to pursue, in university. But it wasn't until I got to university that I realized that geography was so much more than that. And I think just realizing that I could study things like soil science, hydrology, atmospheric science, and really trying to understand sort of the physical world around us, and also how we as humans interact with that world around us, I think was what really sort of drew me to the field and got me really interested in geography.
So what drew me to the discipline of geography was taking notes in the middle of a class. I was in my second term of university, and on a flight out of applied sciences and engineering, and took a range of courses, and one of those was a human geography class. And I remember taking notes while there was this lecture describing the settlement history of a particular region and how particular trade patterns and migration patterns and transportation technologies interacted, and how the society evolved with the natural environment. And I'm taking notes, and all of a sudden I have this epiphany that that's a job. And this person gets paid to do all this really cool stuff all day. I'm like, I want that. I had no idea what that meant, but it was like, I want that. So that was my epiphany. Everybody has different epiphany. For me, that happened 35 years ago. So it was a little while, long time ago. And that was a broad-ranging introduction to geography. And over the years, and it's been many years, 35 years, my perspective on time and space has become more and more urban, focused on cities. And there's just an extraordinary blend of opportunities for us to study geography and cities.
What does geography mean to me? I think the basic answer for me is that it's a way of seeing. I don't see the discipline as being a really bounded, tight space where certain things happen within that don't happen without. I see it as being rather a way of organizing a set of questions and concerns, particularly around how humans interact with the rest of nature, the human-environment interface, and then also questions of space, place, and culture.
Suppose I've been in the Department of Geography at UBC for quite a bit of time. Built an enormous community of researchers and friends. And now that I'm there as a faculty member, I would say that what it means to me as a department, not really as like a discipline, is that it feels like an engaging community of researchers and students who are all doing really exciting work over and over and over again.
When I think about geography, I think about the study of places, and particularly how our role and interactions with places and environments around us. And so as geographers, we study both social and physical processes and really sort of try to make it place-based. And so that can be a single location or a city, and sort of these days it can also be sort of at the global scale. And I think sort of this interdisciplinary bringing together, the physical sciences and the social sciences really places us in a unique place to sort of understand some of the major challenges that we're facing today. So if we think about climate change, not only are we studying sort of the physical basis of climate change, but also what are sort of our responses to climate change and how can we work towards climate adaptation and mitigation, and how can we design our cities to be more sustainable.
So all of my research is oriented towards thinking about what me and my colleague call the extinction paradox, which is from the early 90s to now, we've seen just an explosion of environmental law and policy. It's both species abundance and species diversity that I'm interested in. And I'm interested in, as a political ecologist, in explaining that not in proximate terms, which would be like, cutting down forests cause caribou, population declines, which is all pretty firmly established by ecologists and scientists of all kinds. But we're interested in understanding these kind of political and economic drivers of change. And so really concretely, I have two kind of strands of my research. One focuses on efforts that have been ongoing, again, for a number of decades to turn biodiversity conservation into an investable proposition. So this is like, goes by like conservation finance or impact investing, for-profit kind of efforts that invest in projects that return both in money and conservation. And so I'm really interested in this question of how capital, or like those who hold capital, are trying to solve the very problems that a lot of development has caused in the first place. What the results of that research has largely been that those schemes don't work. And so on very sort of conventional economic terms, these projects don't work because they fail to return in money, capital, or profit. And so I'm really interested in that sort of conundrum, right? Everybody's trying to solve these problems of biodiversity loss, and this is the most kind of approach that's like the most compatible with the status quo. Like it fits the best with like the systems that we have, like within a capitalist system, within sort of state governance and management. So that's one aspect of my research. And then the other aspect of my research, which is still about this paradox, this like trying to explain it or try to like, think through how that paradox, came to be and continues to be, and that's studying woodland caribou declines in Canada. So woodland caribou are a species that really exemplify this extinction paradox. It's the most highly protected, arguably the most highly protected terrestrial species in Canada, protected by this Species at Risk Act. It's a Schedule I endangered species. It's also really important to a lot of First Nations, so it also has protections under treaty rights. So it's a highly protected species. It has been super well studied. People know what causes caribou decline. It's habitat change, which is, of course, in the northeast of BC, would be, oil and gas development, forestry, coal mines. And so in that project, again, we're interested in understanding how something that's so highly protected continues to face such rapid declines.
Hey Kevin, how are you doing? Just sort of surprised to see a human come out of the building. So my own research is in the area of environmental history or historical geography, and I'm particularly interested in how humans have interacted with large river systems over time. And because it's over time, that draws me into historical research. And partly that might be interacting with scientists who do research on past environments through field research of one kind or another. Most of my work is archival in nature, so I visit libraries and archives across the country and internationally, trying to find historical evidence of how people have interacted with these systems over time and how they've changed these systems and in turn been changed by them. So Primarily, I engage in archival research. I also do field work. I try and visit the sites that I'm studying, try and look for traces in the landscape, and learn from communities living in those landscapes to get a better appreciation of how changes occurred over time and how it's been experienced by people over time.
Yeah, so as a physical geographer, so my research focuses on sort of nature-based solutions to climate change. And so I approach this by using a combination of both direct field-based observations. So we have field sites. I have a few field sites in Vancouver and other areas around the world. And I combine that with remote sensing and modeling to try to understand how these ecosystems are both responding to climate change and global change, and also how we can modify these ecosystems for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So what are some different ways that we can manage some of these systems to either, for example, take up more carbon or reduce the emission of other greenhouse gases like methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. And I work with policymakers to help turn some of our science into policy-relevant science. So some of our work has been used to guide the development of new carbon offset protocols to try to quantify greenhouse gas emissions reductions. In this case, it was through the restoration of wetlands in California. So I like to really link what we're learning sort of at the ecosystem level and how that can sort of inform new and emerging climate policy.